and welcome to Cannabis Quick Hits, your single source for everything you need to know about the cannabis industry, brought to you by Green Spoon Martyr and myself. My name is Nick Richards. I am co-chair of the cannabis practice at Green Spoon Martyr, and I'm so happy to be with you today. Usually there's some sort of a topic that has all kinds of issues with it, and nothing is different today, but guess what? We have a really, really amazing development in the cannabis space today that I want to talk to you about. So on September 30th, the Department of Health and Human Services, we learned that they had released a memo to the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, stating that cannabis should be rescheduled as a Schedule III substance. Huge news in the cannabis industry. And interestingly, it was a leaked memo as well that was reported. So, more mystery in the cannabis space as well. But big news. Schedule 3, from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 means that Section 280E goes away, which is an amazing development for the cannabis industry, should result in a lot of profitability for cannabis companies. I say should because we still have a long way to go, and I want to talk a little bit about that, but it is a giant step forward for everyone in the cannabis space, and we are really excited about it. It has come about a year after Biden's original announcement and request to the Health and Human Services to go ahead and make a recommendation to the DEA. So I think that happened kind of fast in a federal government world. That recommendation then was to move it from Schedule 1, which, let's be fair, it was really not a Schedule 1 drug, folks, but to move it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. In some ways, that was very predictable because CBD, the non-psychoactive cannabinoid, is Schedule 4. So it sort of made sense if they were going to make that Schedule 4 that marijuana, THC would show up as a Schedule 3 drug. What does that look like then? That is a pharmacy category. Schedule 3 drugs are prescription drugs that you can get at a pharmacy. So it doesn't suddenly create the clear path for the dispensary that we would, like to see with full legalization. But it does create a first step forward, and it removes cannabis from that category under Schedule 1 with things like opium and heroin and LSD and really strong drugs that cannabis should not be in the same bucket with. And so big move here today. Big move here today. But let's understand what it means, okay? So this was the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. HHS makes a recommendation to the DEA, and now the DEA is going to look at it. And the DEA really has its own test that it uses, a 5-part test. And, look, it utilized that 5-part test in 2016 to reconsider the scheduling of cannabis, and it rejected it under every single one of those 5 parts. And so basically what it found in 2016 is that there was no currently accepted medical use, there was no adequate safety standards, there was no efficacy studies, there was not any acceptance from qualified experts, and there was no widely available science regarding cannabis. And so has that changed? 7 years later, almost 8 years later, do we get some yeses in some of those 5 categories? We'll have to see how that goes. I think a lot of the experts out there are cautiously optimistic, I think is the right word here. That said, the DEA, I don't believe, has ever rejected a recommendation from HHS. So, we got kind of 2 opposing things here in looking back into history on how this might go with the DEA. Hopefully it won't take that long. It's supposed to be an expeditious process. Some people are saying 90 days. It took HHS almost a year. So, could be looking at something as soon as towards the end of the year, or if that takes longer, could be sometime next year. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Many people out there are thinking it could be a few years before the DEA can kind of recognize the true nature of the science out there and act accordingly because of the history demonizing marijuana. So we'll see where this all goes. And we'll see if some things have changed with the DEA. Maybe that there's a new president, things will be different this time around. One problem also that we face, in addition to those 5 categories that I mentioned, is our international treaties that are out there. We have a lot of when marijuana was scheduled as a Schedule 1 controlled substance during the Nixon administration, that administration went out and pretty much made it so that any other country out there, if they want to work with us, they have to make it illegal too. And if they don't, then under our treaty, a lot of bad things happen. And we have that same obligation as well. And so seems like there's going to need to be a bunch of things that need to be changed here in order to get to a descheduling under Schedule 3. We'll see how all that goes. We'll see how much those treaties affect DEA's decision on descheduling marijuana. But let's imagine that it happens quickly. Okay, what is the greatest thing about that? 280E goes away. True, the current industry still is probably illegal under Schedule 3, but it doesn't have to deal with Section 280E. Section 280E is the code section that disallows deductions of expenses for marijuana businesses, and it really renders marijuana businesses not profitable. It takes all the profit out of marijuana businesses. So bottom line, this announcement means better profits for marijuana businesses, even if they're not fully legal under the new change that we're looking at. And that alone is a big day. 280E is crippling the cannabis industry right now, and removal of 280E will enable the industry to grow, be responsible, get to a place of legitimacy that it really should be in, as we've been on this path forward. Some important things to think about on that. I have been advocating for the industry to recognize that disallowed expenses under Section 280E are actually capital expenses, and they should be capitalized and carried forward to a time in which they can be utilized. Folks, we have that time on our horizon now, right? You need to get your act together and get your prior 280E expenses calculated, get them in the mix, seek a professional advice about that, because it could well be that we get into legalization or deschedulization, let's call it, and now those prior 280E costs can be recouped once 280E is gone. Talk to your tax professional about that, but there is an opportunity for that, and I do believe that that should be something that the industry should be advocating for. Super important, super important. In fact, if we can get that, you could be looking at profits with tax deductions over years, so where you don't want to pay any tax and you're making great profits, and the industry is really able to then accelerate and grow as it should. So really, really exciting time. Talk to your tax professional, see what you need to be doing to be getting ready for the future, because folks, we can see it now. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Nick Richards, co-host of the Cannabis Practice at Green Spoon Martyr, and your source for all things cannabis. Thank you.